Good afternoon, everyone. This is our maybe I think fourth or fifth TechTalk series. We're very excited and happy today that we are having Ms. Carla Bailo, who is President and CEO of the Center of Automotive Research, Center for Automotive Research, and is a leader in the engineering program management, 42 years of experience in the automotive industry. I put a question mark on it. Under their leadership, CAR, Center of Automotive Research, CAR continues to be a very excellent resource of objective and unbiased research, analysis, and information regarding the North American automotive industry. In addition to her role at CAR, Ms. Bailo is currently an independent director of the corporate board for SM Energy and Advanced Auto Parts. Prior to joining CAR, she was most recently the Assistant Vice President for Mobility Research and Business Development at the Ohio State University. She also has 25 years of experience at Nissan North America Incorporated, where she served as a Senior Vice President of Research and Development. Ms. Bailo also spent 10 years at General Motors. She has an MS degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Michigan and a BS degree in mechanical engineering from Carleton University. Please welcome Ms. Bailo.
Thanks, and sorry for the late start. I was hoping I wouldn't get the 10-minute rule. I was looking at my watch very closely. I don't know if it still exists, but when I was in university, the professor was 10 minutes late in that. So, and you sometimes they would walk in exactly 9 minutes and 30 seconds or something like that. Today I want to spend some talk about what's happening in the world of autonomy and what's happening in the world of sustainability, the world of electrification, and why sustainability is so important today in the automotive and almost in any industry. So, I already said that. So why now? Why is ESG having a moment? And by the way, you're going to tell which slides were done by engineers and which slides were not. This is an engineering slide. We put everything on the slide. If there's a lot of pictures, that's the slides I prefer. That's not done by an engineer. But that's not really true in this. So the engineers are getting better. But really, there's a really perfect storm happening. First, the public is driving it. The public is driving in purchases and in lifestyle decisions. People want to know the carbon footprint of what they're buying. They want to see the entire wheel of wells in the vehicle. They want to work for companies that have some kind of environmental or sustainability mission. Second reason is transportation is now the largest source of carbon emissions. And that's because the energy companies got better and have started using more renewable sources of energy. So as the swamp drains down, other trees stick up. And right now it is the transportation industry. And it's not just the E in ESG, it's also about the S and being inclusive, making sure you have the right diversity and inclusion in your company, making sure you have the right diversity and inclusion on every project you do, because that's what leads innovation. And then I mentioned earlier, but we're seeing it now with the workforce shortages that people don't want to work for a company that doesn't have the right social and environmental stance. It's very important that they believe strongly in what the company is producing and how they're producing. So in the automotive industry, there's several things that we're seeing. We're seeing the huge electrification. I have some data in that. We're seeing the billions of dollars that have been announced, around 13.5 billion and growing, but I'll show you those figures. Looking at really cleaning up your manufacturing plant, your manufacturing footprint by putting in sustainable energy sources. What's interesting is your battery electric plants draw between 4 and 5 times the amount of energy to produce an EV than to produce an internal combustion engine. So when we look at where all of these people are putting their plants, it's one of the big factors that goes into their decision making, which is why you see so many of those plants today going around the Tennessee Valley. They have pretty cheap cotton there. Really look at recycling and this kind of zero clean energy cycle. And again, looking at the whole vehicle, from the energy used to manufacture components going into the vehicle, all the way to the end of life and the recyclability of that vehicle. Not just looking at what's coming out of the tailpipe. That's really not the true story. And then from a social standpoint, there are a lot of OEMs or GM and others that are telling all of their suppliers, by the way, we have ESG statements, you need to adhere to those as well. We say we're going to be carbon neutral by 2030, we expect you to adhere to that too, or guess what? We're not going to purchase any more cars. So it's starting to trickle through the entire community. Within ESG, there's scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Anybody know what those are? So scope 1 are things that you can easily control in your manufacturing plant. Scope 2 are things that your suppliers are providing for you. And scope 3 are things that you don't even have control of, but contribute to your carbon footprint, like how are you receiving reams of paper into this university? That's scope 3. Do you know? And the trucks. Internal combustion, are they battery electric, are they fuel cell? Probably they're internal combustion. How often do you get them? What's that carbon footprint look like? You don't control it. You buy it from Acme paper down the street. So now companies are being asked to care about those and to actually report those in their filings to the government. Green logistics, I've mentioned, really involved in your community, doing projects with your community, working to restore and employ people in your community. Diversity initiatives, I already mentioned, that's so important. It's important, especially related to innovation. And I think one thing that we always have to be careful about that companies have done for years, they created a chief diversity officer. This happened when I was with Nissan in the late 90s, early 2000s. We had a chief diversity officer. We put that person in the corner, in a desk in the corner, and said, please fix our diversity problem. We didn't bring them to the table to talk about succession planning or hiring or any of those big decisions. Now those folks are integrated into that process to make sure that it's happening. And companies are starting to report the data. They also are beginning to lead executive compensation to achieve those goals. And governance is really, really critical. Ever since the Enron event happened in the early 2000s, the governance rules have greatly been enhanced. President Biden came in on August 5th and said we are going to have 50% EVs by 2030. His proclamation does not include hybrids. It only includes battery electric, plug-in, and fuel cell. That's it. There's a lot of automakers who really don't think that's correct. The hybrid is still better than a pure internal combustion engine, and it's a lot cheaper than a full battery electric today. Today, many are saying by 2025 we should have cost parity. It is a voluntary target, so they don't have to meet it. There's no standard. They have to meet the CAFE rules. They have to pay the penalty that was just announced 2 days ago for if they do not achieve the CAFE targets, but they do not have to meet this target. But many companies are planning to, and many of them have said we're going to have fully electric or fully carbon neutral by 2030, 2035, some say 2040. I'm a little bit because the CEOs that are saying that today won't be around in those years, so it's easy to say it, but I mean, the commitments are coming. They're putting dollars behind it. So EVs are really changing the narrative. It's all in the news today. And I'm really curious to hear your thoughts about EVs when I'm done speaking. But regulatory, many different countries around the globe, including our country, are starting to make very clear rules about EVs, creating EV zones, saying after a certain period of time, downtown Paris, for example, you will not be able to drive an internal combustion engine in certain areas. London has had a carbon tax for a while. It started back in around 2005 or 6. If you wanted to come into London with a big SUV, you were going to pay £50 a day to be able to do that. Technology is improving every single day in terms of range, in terms of cost, in terms of efficiencies, looking for other materials besides lithium ion. We're not doing enough research here in this country. We are doing about 1/8 of the amount of research that they're doing in China. And this is where we need to really get the government to step up with some of the money that's needed. Interestingly enough, President Biden probably in the next few days will be invoking the Defense Protective Act for battery critical materials. That's great for materials, but we need those dollars to come for research. We're seeing a huge change in the product. EVs first came out in the early 2010s. The Leaf was the first one. Was it a real vehicle? Was it robust? Was it like the Hummer? Was it like the Lightning? No. And we found that the consumer's mind didn't shift until we're starting to see some of these, what we would call normal vehicles or desired vehicles become electrified. So I think coming out with the Lightning, coming out with the Mach-E, coming out with the Silverado EV, Ram EV, is going to change the narrative when people see that these vehicles can fit in their lives. It doesn't solve all the other issues with price, with range, with charging, but at least the product portfolio is getting better. And then financing, we are seeing the investors on Wall Street rewarding the EVs. Look at Tesla's share price, it's $500 a share. Compared to GM's, $35 a share. Really? And it's been that high before they even started making it. So for those of us who've been with legacy automakers, it's unbelievable. But they're being rewarded because of their portfolio, because of their sustainability goals. And you can see it with many, many other EV startups as well being rewarded. Rivian is another one, although they recently lost share price because they raised price, they lowered price, they missed their deliverables, but still their share price is higher than the legacy automakers. And the EV market share is increasing dramatically. I'll show you some figures. And for the first time ever, it's not linked to the price of fuel. So if we look at where we thought we were going to be, and this was the best data that CAR could gather. Okay, I broke out a pointer, really lost. I'm going to check that one, that's why it makes so much fun of this. So our original data showed it going through about 2021, and with some of the things that we had coming in terms of product portfolio and investment, we said we should be about 20% by 2030. So we were telling folks 50%, somewhere in the 2040 range. This is what the 50% goal is. That's a huge asymptotical reach to be able to get there. And I'll show data in a little bit to show you actually where we are today, but that's still a pretty good reach, and we're relying a lot on consumers. And I'm not so sure consumers have bought in for a number of reasons, and many of them are not wrong. So we had consumer EV incentives as the Build Back Better, the one that Senator Manchin just completely destroyed. And part of the reason, and it's dead, it's really dead, it's not coming back. And partly because there was so much pork put on it. It wasn't just EV, but there were so many other things that were added, several things that the automakers didn't like. So yes, incentives were there, rebates were there for consumers to purchase, good thing. Money was there for charging stations, good thing. Extra rebates if the vehicle was made in a union shop, not popular. The fact that after 2025, no imported vehicles anymore, there's no way that we can reach 50% by 2030 without imported vehicles. So that's very debatable. So because of all these things that kept getting added, there was no way it could go through. So now people are trying to get it through, but with this kind of lame duck Congress and it being election year, we're really doubtful that it's going to be able to go through, but we are seeing some states step up with some state initiatives in terms of rebates. So what's likely, we think that we will start to see separate bills that will try to replicate some of those portions of the Build Back Better. Replacement of the consumer tax credit with an uncapped program. The cap that is on the vehicles now, for example, Tesla and GM have already sold too many vehicles to be able to get the incentive. Part of Build Back Better got rid of that cap. So no matter how many you sold, you still got the incentive for purchase. So we expect that will come back, incentives for EV purchases, and we'll be able to include a lot of different products because the world of mobility of tomorrow is not just a car and SUV. It includes bicycles, it includes scooters, it includes small city cars, and all of those need to be included in this program. So we have to wait and see what happens. So let me move on, and this was not done by an engineer. This was done by a policy person and a smart mobility person that the background is actually civil engineering, but really much involved now in the mobility ecosystem and the design of roadways. Because quite frankly, you can't separate urban planning from smart mobility. It's impossible. And urban planning, if you go to a school of architecture, at least up until the last few years, what did they design? Buildings around roadways. Roadways were the first thing that were put in, and then we figured out how to make buildings go around, rather than designing cities for how people live. Totally different way. So I would say urban planning needs to get turned upside down. But when you look at this, you see many, many different forms of mobility. I don't see people walking. We need to add that in there. But you see, you know, we have transport for persons with disabilities. We have platooning little small city cars. We have actual individual vehicles. We have public transit here. We have bicycles. Everything has to be able to coexist on the roadways in the future, but do it safely. And safely is the key. So they all need to be connected. Some autonomous, not all. Probably it'll be a long time till we're all autonomous, although we could have a big debate all day about can you really have autonomous vehicles with human-driven vehicles? I don't think so, but there are people who still maintain it's going to happen. So automation fits, but this is the big key. Adaptivity. We often tend in cities, especially in cities, we make 40, 50-year roadways and plans. And we don't change them for 40 or 50 years. But in today's world of technology, with things happening so quick, you have to have a system that can be adapted. So trial things in small cases, see if it works, and then begin to expand it. And it's a totally new way of thinking from urban planning, from how cities develop their roadways and manage. Throughput, it's totally different. And use data to be smart about it. We see public transit systems, I'm sure you see them all the time. Buses running, same route, same schedule, certain times of day full, other times of day practically empty. Well, why do we have a big, huge diesel emitting bus driving 2 people? Or you see a big steak truck with a 2x4 making a delivery. It doesn't make sense. We should be looking, using data, analyzing that data, and then right sizing and right propulsing the type of product. So today we have a lot of companies doing really cool stuff. And a lot of partnerships happening. I've just got a few of them up here. Uber is probably one of the most famous. It's had its problems out in Scottsdale. It's still doing some research in the Pittsburgh area. Argo AI working with Ford. Voyage is doing not only these big minivans, but also they're doing some very small vehicles in senior living complexes. Most seniors, and I put myself in that boat, I'll just say people over 60, you're gonna outlive your driver's license by 10 years. probably, although COVID shortened our lives a little bit. And I would venture that most of us are going to still want to do things, even without our license. So these ride-hailing services, ride-sharing services, senior living complex, transit ways are going to become very, very important as people age in place. Waymo, we know they're one of the most famous. They've got the most amount of miles. And today I just saw TechTalk, who's one of the co-CEOs, announce that they actually have started true autonomous on the road work. Cruise, GM now is doing autonomous drives in San Francisco. You can see one of their latest postings on YouTube where the CEO and Mark Royce got a nice little fun ride from town at night. Lyft is working with Aptiv out in Las Vegas, still doing work there. And it's up there in the in this upper spot. I should know by the paint, and I can't remember, so I apologize about that. But so far, most are offered as a service. And as we are seeing the automotive industry change and people's buying habits change, and the price of a car now is, most people can afford a new car. The average American today can afford a car that's 14 years old. So with the price going up so much, we really need to be looking at different services, delivery services, et cetera, to be able to deploy more and more of these autonomous types of vehicles. Automated bus rapid transit is a great way to move a lot of people and be able to do it conveniently. Most studies of public transit, if you looked at any urban studies, in many cities to go a short distance, maybe 5 to 10 miles, can take up to 2 hours because of having to change buses and then different payment systems. So it's just really inconvenient. But this gives a very good way to be efficient. And many cities are beginning to deploy this for the population. We see a lot of autonomous shuttles in contained areas. So we'll start seeing them more and more on campuses. We've seen some on college campuses. We see them also in a lot of work areas. Europe has deployed several of these in different employment parks. I think we know that locomotors did cease operations, but we still have Navia, we still have Easy Mile, and now there's also Arrival. Take a look at Arrival. You get a chance. They've got micro factories that are really quite interesting. And Nuro is one of my most favorite companies. They just keep doing clever things with grocery delivery and food delivery and forming partnerships with some of the big guys. Starship Technologies here. They have a pretty neat product that delivers food in various municipalities. And then these are the little devices that were going around in our area. They stopped doing it now. But again, maybe food delivery, but still the cost is an issue, but this will start to come down. Technology is better. This is a timeline of connectivity. I don't know how many of you know, but there was a bill at one point saying all vehicles had to communicate by 2021. When President Trump got elected, that just went by the wayside, so it's gone. And there's no rule now on by when vehicles need to be communicating. And we've also had a huge change. Back in the early work that was done in the late 90s, early 2000s, everybody thought we needed to use DSRC devices on the side of the roadway. And then as cellular data got better, 5G and beyond, now everyone is saying they want to use V2X technology. So China is one of the leaders right now with V2X technology, but many of the manufacturers are also beginning to deploy. And as soon as we have 5G in most places and along most roadways, we will also have better connectivity. And I mentioned before, and I love this picture that shows all the multimodality. But the other thing that we tend to do is we say we have a solution. So let's go find a problem. And by the way, my solution will fit your problem. And it's exactly the opposite. So as an engineer, instead of having a solution and then we go find a problem, we should be trying to understand the problem first. And then think about how technology and data can solve that problem. It's a different way. But I was the lead on the Columbus Smart City project, and that's what made the difference. We went out and we discovered what the problems with mobility were in several of the communities around Columbus, and we used technology to sort those out. Now, what we put in the proposal is not what we ended up doing in a lot of cases, because we thought we understood the problem, but we really didn't understand it. So we had to morph it a little bit. But it really taught me a lot about using mobility to really improve people's lives. But you've got differences throughout. You've got rural, you've got exurban, you've got suburban, you've got exurban. You've got different demographics. Some cities have a bunch of old people. Some cities are young and vibrant, and they require different mobility solutions. But again, that demographic is always changing. You have to have this adaptive thinking. Climate makes a big difference. All the work is being done now in the Southwest. Why? Well, batteries like those temperatures. Batteries don't like the cold here. And beyond that, all the sensors don't really like snow and rain. And I don't know how many of you have a front sensor, but after I go about 2 miles in a heavy snowstorm, I automatically have the warning symbol on my front dash that says nothing is working up there. So don't do anything stupid. And then culture has a big part of it too. Do you have a group of people that are willing to try new things, or is it more of a reluctance to risk? And you have to really design based on that. Oh goodness, I'm almost done. So now I can start pointing. Not too candid. Hope I don't confuse them. So what are the states doing? This is one of my points that I often talk to our legislator about. Why are the states doing this anyway, separately? Why don't we have a federal policy for connectivity, for autonomy? And heck, why don't we even have rules for advanced driver avoidance systems? How many of you have been in a car that has blind spot warning, or, yeah, probably everybody at some level. Do you know we have 80 different names for those systems amongst all the automakers? 80. Probably there's give or take 80 different names. So we're confusing the heck out of the customer. Not only that, we don't have any rules for those. So adaptive cruise control, if you've ever been in different brands, they behave much different. I was fine, and it allowed me to get really, really close. I was in another, and it was so far back, I felt ridiculous. It's this variation, and we're confusing the customer. When we do that, it's bad for the industry because the customer loses trust. When you lose trust, then they stop utilizing the features. For our driving avoidance systems, 60% of people turn them off because they annoy them, because they're beeping at them. They don't understand why, so they turn them off. The things they pay for, the things we put on there to keep them safe, they turn on. Most people don't realize if you go into the menu, which is 3 or 4 down, remember this when you're designing HMI systems, don't make it 3 or 4 levels because people won't do it. 3 to 4 levels down, you can adjust the sensitivity. Wow, but people never find it because it's down for the menu. So whenever you design an HMI system, have a non-engineer test it. Somebody who just wants to drive the car simply. Don't make it into a master's level course. I remember easily, I ran many programs as chief vehicle engineer. Guys brought me this simulation. Guys, and there was a girl too, but back in my day, there weren't many women, there still aren't enough engineering. But they said, okay, I want you to change the climate control from 64 to 78 or whatever. Okay, so it was pretty easy. There was just a button there. One, you hit the climate button, change it, easy. Once you change the radio station, no audio button. And I never did figure it out. Honestly, I was trying every button. I tried settings. I thought there'd be an audio. And I said, I can't get it. And the engineer said, it's really simple, Carla, really simple. You just hit this button. Okay, wasn't audio, it was something to do with media, hit media. And you weren't calling it media then, it's radio. Hit media, then hit radio, then hit whichever Sirius FM. It was 4 steps to even get to where I could change it. And then from there, I had to figure it out. I said, this is ridiculous. What do you mean? It sounds logical. It's logical to an engineer. It's not logical. And I'm an engineer. It wasn't even logical to me. But anyway, I'll go back to this, where I started. We don't have a federal policy. This is why the states are doing everything on their own. And these are the states that have adopted some form of allowing automated vehicle deployment. You'll notice in all these slides, I don't say autonomous, I say automated, because there's no vehicle that today is autonomous. They're all automated. And it's all different kinds of rules depending on what you want to do. So in some, there's nothing on the books to say it's not. It all looks in a nice dark color, so it's just presumed that it's allowed. And then others, Michigan, California, have a state-approved process. And what you see is a lot of the testing is actually done in some of these different states today. So this is kind of a fun little chart. We've been doing it for several years. Kind of promises made, promises not kept. And not kept for good reason. If you would have asked me in 2015, I would have said we have autonomous vehicles on the roadway here. Tesla said they would. Audi said they were going to have level 3, which means even more advanced than Tesla's autopilot or Cadillac Cruise on the roadway today. So then they changed in 2019, came out with some more promises. Now most of them have really shifted here. And it makes a lot of sense if they did. It's technically difficult. It's really tough. Yes, if you've just got one vehicle going on a proving ground on one road all by itself, it's easy. When you start getting different road conditions, when you start intermingling with people driving, the human brain, which can do anything, and we have to continue to learn that through machine learning and artificial intelligence, it takes time. Not only that, there are all the policy issues. Insurance, there's legal, there's policies about who owns the roadways and what you can do. Each state is different, and within the state, several of the different counties can be different. You go down a stretch of roadway in several states, it's owned by many, many people. It can start being owned by the state, then it's owned by the city, and then it's just not owned and managed by a consultant. It's amazing what you can face, but all of them have different rules. So it's really a hodgepodge. So what you're seeing now, these continue to be delayed, they will continue to even more delayed because nobody's going to introduce this until they're down sure it's safe. So that was the whole presentation I wanted to talk with you about today. And I think we have time. Yeah, we have 20 minutes for questions. Do you want me to close this presentation?
You can leave it, I think, and then we'll go from there. So this opens the floor, questions. Yes, there.
Yeah, so John, in your experience, to what extent is it going to be more important that we upgrade the electrical grid and have more charging stations versus improving battery technology? Because it seems to me like a lot of the focus is on battery technology and having more charging stations, but I don't, from my understanding, our electrical grid could handle 50 or 60% of everyone having an electric car.
Yeah, you know, I ask that question a lot. Go to consumers, Detroit Energy, Duke Energy, AEP, and you know what they all tell me is the grid is fine. In fact, they want the extra money to be able to make it better. So they're actually looking forward to this because it gives them a reason to actually make the grid stronger and more resilient. And I didn't talk about this, and I promised that I would. From a consumer standpoint, there are 3 reasons they don't buy a car today. One of the 3 is the grid itself. They don't have enough charging. 95% of people still charge at home or at the office. And people don't realize that they can actually get pretty good rebates for put a charger in their house. And a lot of people don't realize they can just simply use their standard outlet. It takes a long time, but they can do it. They have overnight charge, it's no problem. So I think a lot of people don't understand that. The grid itself, yes, it needs more resiliency built in. We saw it through the Texas storm. We've seen it through other calamities. That it needs reinforcement. It also needs backup. One of the clever things that we've seen a lot of work happening in Japan, especially, is being able to use the vehicles to power back into the grid, being able to power back into homes in times of disruption. There will be more work being done like that, back and forth to the grid. There's also a lot of work to have more resilient backups. Some people have talked about using our old batteries as backup, and to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I'd rather recycle them because by the time they're old, the technology is so bad, it's going to take a lot of space for a little bit of energy storage. Better to find a different way to store the energy. I don't know, I have to trust what the energy companies tell me. We just need money to make it better, they say. We don't have enough money in charging stations today. There was $7.5 billion that came out of the Infrastructure Act that was passed recently. $7.5 billion is not nearly what we need to be able to put in. The amount of charging stations that are planned, we or so what we've seen. The issue is going to be as well when we start putting in DC fast chargers. The amount of draw for a DC fast charger is amazing. We're starting to see dealers now really balk about it because they need a DC fast charger, but they're being told by the energy company they need to really increase their capacity to be able to put it in, and that's expensive. And those DC fast chargers are expensive. More research is needed. Yeah.
What about,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not the moderator.
what about like farm equipment, something that I have to use every day? And I work, I'd say 10 hours a day in the field. And I got 4 tractors in the field, in 4 different fields. Can't charge all 4 of them when I get home. We'll have, I mean,
Yeah. So John Deere is actually doing some pretty cool stuff with electrification. And I don't know what I can tell you two interesting things. When I've been at colleges that have a strong agricultural program, Michigan State or at Ohio State, for example, a lot of their equipment is becoming autonomous to reduce the workload requirement, but not so much electrification. So,
I mean, we're not autonomous, but we use like GPS. So I mean, that's all your rows in a line. So, but I still got to be in there to turn the tractor.
yeah. So, but there are some that are starting to be autonomous. One of the things that I know they're working on is today your equipment is quite large. And my understanding, and I'm not a farmer, I'm a city kid, but my understanding is that large equipment compacts the soil and makes it not as fertile over time. So I know they're working on some kind of smaller, more agile, kind of spider-like autonomous. You need a lot more of them, but those would be electrified. You've still got the problem with downtime. How long is it going to be down, and can you have a fast charger there that can manage to be able to get your work done? I recently did an interview with the state of Nebraska asking me about, hey, can the farmers use electric pickups? I said, well, if they're just using it on their ranch and they're going short distances, it's probably okay. But if they're using it to pull a horse trailer and go long distances, that might not work for them. So it really depends on the usage and how it's going to work for you.
So what do you say about that for people that have horses or whatever that want to travel across the country? Obviously, I can't afford to put them on a plane, but I can't afford to have them sit on a trailer while my car charges or my truck will charge.
That's the whole thing. And that's part of the problem too with electric full-size trucks, is making that economic equation work, because you can't afford that downtime. In a drayage company that's, let's call it Amazon or Walmart, every minute they're not delivering a good in that product, they're losing dollars dramatically. And those are very low profit companies. So fuel cells are a much better choice in a lot of cases. And there's a lot of really great work going on in fuel cells right now. So in certain cases, that's going to actually be much better. And I just read about a fuel cell generator on board being used to power batteries, which I thought that was really quite interesting.
So I think one of the stumbling blocks, at least from the consumer perspective for EVs, is the perceived needs. That being that, number one, I have to have a charging station at my home. Number two, I have to have charging stations, every so far apart that I'll be able to charge my car if needed. And then there's the part where, well, what if I want to take a long trip? I'm not going to be able to use my car because of that. And those are all things that make me think, well, maybe I shouldn't have an EV, maybe I should have either a hybrid or continue with a gas-powered vehicle. And I think they really haven't been really well addressed yet by the car manufacturers.
That again is one of the main things that everyone's hearing, from consumers. And that's why I think consumers aren't necessarily going to drive the electrical revolution. It's going to come from small delivery companies. It's going to come from ride sharing services. You're going to see that in the city vehicles, the cities need to start purchasing EVs as well. And once those start coming into being, get the infrastructure better laid out, we're able to get some more fast chargers out there so that when you're on a long trip, you just take 10 minutes, about the same as if you need to put gas in your car. When we see that kind of a breakthrough, then we'll see it becoming just everybody will feel comfortable. But right now there's hesitation. And many of the people who have purchased an EV have something else for those long trips that we're talking about. Just to give you a little bit of statistics about electric vehicle drivers, all of them household incomes well north of $100,000. They don't need incentives, although they've been getting them. So part of the Build Back Better was to give incentives for middle class folks, but I mean, well north of $100,000. So not even close to the average American household income today, which is $66,000. And so most of them have a Land Rover or a big some SUV that they take as well. So their carbon footprint is kind of the same as a hybrid, maybe you combine the two together. And they use for daily kind of things, but they have that backup for those long trips. So the other thing that I mentioned earlier was about these rider usership kinds of programs. And this is where I think we'll start to see EVs really blossom. If I can get a mobility package, same as my cell phone package has certain things. If I can get a mobility package where I can have an EV Monday through Friday or for the month of May, because I know I'm not going anywhere, but then I know I have a long trip, I'm going to go out west for 2 weeks, I can get hybrid or something like that. Then I'm not investing in one particular mode, and this makes a lot more sense. And there are companies that are starting to look at this, but I really think this will help people change their behaviors.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I have two questions, one about research, one about assessment, stuff like this. Being into the research, faculty, students are interested in research. So what do you see there is really a hot area to start now on? And from your vision, like in 5 years, that probably there's an area that nobody is considering now, but it's good to start working on it now. What the two topics you would recommend to us to probably consider for our research?
Well, right now there's tons of money coming out from the DOE and the DOD. And that's where the money is coming for research, DOE and DOD, for electrification. So different battery chemistries, solid state batteries. I strongly recommend solid state. I think it's great in terms of cost and efficiencies. I think fuel cell is another area, especially for big trucks, construction equipment, and naval, and also our military. They want strongly to be able to have a green carbon footprint. They're concerned about how to get hydrogen though, and how to be able to get that out into the combat arenas. So looking at hydrogen and supply of hydrogen is important. from a connected autonomous standpoint, really looking at artificial intelligence, machine learning, and how we can possibly have all different scenarios, driving simulators. This work has to be done in simulation. It can't be done all on the road. That's impossible. So what are those main scenarios? How can you also help with some of the policies and regulations that need to develop as we move?
Sustainability question is two parts. Now, some people argue that, yes, we're stopping using gas at the gas station. However, electricity is gonna come from solar, mostly from plants, which is coal. And even I'm gonna talk about Michigan, for example. DE working on moving in 2050 more toward. So that's the argument. Will we have a balance if I do a math? With the electrical vehicle, if you use it, have less footprint? And my other question about sustainability, what will happen with the cars after the life expires? Is there any research in the area where is it gonna become a mass issue for us down the road? Because there are toxic hazardous materials. So we can address it.
Okay, your first question, remind me quickly. Your
About
first question was
the
about.
source of electricity coming from.
Yeah,
coal.
yeah, I mean, in my presentations, some of my other presentations, I talk about if the electricity is coming from coal, you're actually, in the total carbon footprint, you're worse than a very clean burning internal combustion engine. Now, because the amount of energy companies are starting to transition to clean energy, that argument doesn't bear so much weight. And most of them have very strong goals by 2040, by 2050. And at that point, clearly that's a better input. But as I mentioned earlier, not only what's going in and coming out of the vehicle, but what kind of energy are you using to produce components? What kind of transportation are you using to get cobalt from the Democratic Republic of Congo, because that's where it's mined, to take it to China, to refine it, and then to bring it someplace to put it into cells, and then to bring it someplace else to put it into the packs. This all contributes to carbon footprint. We're not measuring it that way today, and I'm a big advocate of really looking at it very comprehensively. So it's going to take time for that carbon footprint to really be correct. And I think we also have to look at the rest of the world. It's going to be a long time until electrification gets to the rest of the world. And even if certain countries go to a zero footprint, it takes time for that to cascade through. And now I forgot your
The
second.
batteries, environmental.
Yeah, that's a huge part, and I mentioned that earlier. If you're in Europe, for example, or China or Japan, every part on your vehicle has a recycling symbol. We don't do that here, but they do it there. We also don't recycle our garbage here. I lived 2 years in Germany and 5 years in Japan. In my office in Tokyo with Nissan, I had 26 recycling bins in my office. And I don't care how high up you were, well, Carlos didn't have to sort his own garbage, probably. I had to sort my own. And if you put it in the wrong bin, I don't know who these garbage police were, and I don't know how you got this job, but they went through, and if they found something improperly, your sandwich wrapper was in the wrong number, they put it on a bulletin board in the recycling room, put in this number, big X, belonged in this number. It's your garbage out there. Now living here, I still recycle a ton, but I have to take it to my own recycling station. I'm not sure if it really gets recycled. The way it's handled. We need to start here with basics of recycling, and then let's get these numbers on the different products and everybody who's now putting in a battery plant, I always say you better have a recycling one right next to it. Because these things will start coming back because we can't reuse them. As I mentioned, the technology is going so fast, you can't take an old battery and put it in a different product. It would just be ridiculous. There's no efficiency there. So we have to recycle and extract those precious materials and reuse it. Now, that process itself uses energy and a lot of energy when you go through the different, desalination processes. And I looked at the whole mess of how this is done, and it's quite complex. There's 3 different ways to do it. I'm not going to bore you with the detail, but that energy has to count too. But we have to be able to recycle it. Truly.
I think we have time, maybe one or two more questions. I think I have first.
So, with all the benefits of electric vehicles, why is there so much need for government regulation and government given all these they're so good and the market could regulate itself?
Yeah, because it's unaffordable today. The price of an internal combustion engine is now about $47,000. The average American, $66,000. I can afford a vehicle that's 14 years old. Electric vehicles are even higher than that today with the portfolios that are in the marketplace. Which is why urban vehicles that I mentioned earlier, like $5,000 car from China, is really affordability standpoint. Because of that, people can't afford it. It's very simple. So the whole purpose of adding more incentives were to have the average American have an opportunity to purchase. But even the incentives that are planned at the prices that we're at, it's going to be very difficult. Price parity should come in 2025 when the batteries get better. And that's what everyone's telling me right now. 2025, you can buy an internal combustion engine or electric vehicle, same price.
Part of the problem that we're subsidizing as a government the fossil fuel industry, and instead of taking that money and subsidizing the fossil fuel industry, if we took that and put it into electric vehicles, the price of gas would go up. People the balance would be different, basically. So I mean, those are things that we have to do on a societal level.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not going to happen.
It's going to be very tough.
This is all about profitability.
Just even getting the government, to agree on incentives in general was not with all the different add-ons that got put in because of the way we spoke.
We do have about 20 people actually soon, so let's take a question that came online.
We have one from Dr. Che. He was wondering if there's any ongoing projects focusing on the cybersecurity aspect of automotive research.
Oh, that's a great question. There's a lot. There is a group, I mentioned it to some folks I was talking with earlier, called Auto ISAC, which was put together specifically for the automotive community to be able to really dig into what's happening and start to be able to make some standards around it. Also, SAE has a cybersecurity committee, and they come up with some standards. One thing we know about cyber is it's going to continue, it's going to get smarter, and the best thing you better do is to be able to recognize if you've been hacked and do something about it. You're not going to prevent it totally, but definitely through the DoD especially, there are a lot of projects available. I would also recommend joining Auto ISAC, or at least getting hooked into their newsletter to see what's happening. There's some amazing things being studied right now, especially with what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. Tremendous amount of work happening.
We have one more last question. Anyone? Okay. Can I go, because I think, no, go ahead, sir, because I think he has a chance.
So you were just mentioning something recently about the production of these overall, like, so, do you think that we should look at, I know you know my legislation, realigning goals of when the production overall will actually reduce carbon?
This is one of the things that we've actually been studying is how to time this properly so that we don't avoid some unintended consequences that we talked about. Supply chains, be it in labor, be it in jobs lost. We have a lot of jobs at risk, so we have a lot of people still working in the internal combustion arena. So how do we how do we align the training and the upskilling so that we don't end up creating a worse situation? Like this transition? So there is work ongoing, and we're working with a number of our legislators here in this state. It's Michigan is really, we have 11 engine and transmission plants here. That are basically going to be out of business. And we have not announced any huge back. I was actually worried for we have more in the transition. But look at it very carefully and make sure that all the, I call them tentacles of the octopus transition, and all make sure that we're not creating. I do think that, President Biden invoking the Defense Protection Act for critical minerals is going to make a big difference. Democratic Republic of Congo has, the vast majority of the cobalt, but it does exist in other places, and it probably exists in more.
One more.
I have one that just came in. What are US automakers going to do about keeping the vehicles secure?
Cyber security, because I already talked kind of about the regulations and policies.
Probably, yes.
I don't know.
Yes, I said yes.
I don't know. Right now, there's a big question. Right now, all the data that they're gathering, and believe me, if you have a new car, they're getting lots of data on you all the time. Because you just signed accept when you bought the car. That's just what happens, just like this accept on your phone. So they're getting a ton of data, and right now they own that data, and they're managing the security of that data. When data starts going to the cloud and we start having communication between people, this is kind of a space. It's going to make sure that we have the certification protocols, that the message coming in is a real message and not a false message. This is all being studied. And again, the SAE group on cyber is really working on this along with the automakers. It is one area where the competition of the automakers is going down a notch because they realize that this is a problem.
All right. Well, with that, I think let's just conclude it here. If there are any questions, I'll leave it to Carla to discuss here if she wants to take a few more minutes. But thank you very much for a very nice presentation.